Hello, hi, and warm regards. Today we're going to be talking about risk versus reward and how it can make or break your video game. What exactly do I mean by risk versus reward? When you're playing a video game, a challenge is issued. As the player, to complete the challenge, you must fulfill a condition that involves overcoming some obstacle. Let's get specific and take a look at an action game like Super Mario Bros. The challenge is to get to the end of the stage, and the various obstacles include enemies, holes, and a time limit. These obstacles present to the player moments of risk. While risks are easily understood, there's a lot of common misconceptions about the reward factor of video games. A reward doesn't have to simply be completing the challenge. In Super Mario Bros., you can feel a sense of reward even from simply making a difficult jump across a gap. Rewards actually cannot exist without risks. They actually directly come from the relief of risks, especially when the player feels that in the relief, there's a sense of progression towards the completion of the challenge. The scale of the reward that you feel is also relative to a few factors in the sense of that progression, and also the sense of how much is at stake leading up to overcoming the risk. Let's show you what I mean in another way when we show you what happens when the risk is raised and lowered. Here we have a Goomba. It's on screen far away from Mario, so the risk is relatively low. You can stand around, jump. You can basically ignore this little guy because he presents very little risk at the moment. Now let's see what happens when you move this Goomba right next to Mario. You have to jump away or move, basically avoid getting hit. There's a sense of urgency. If you move away, you feel a sense of relief, but the Goomba's still there. If you jump and end up stomping him, there's a greater feeling of satisfaction. The risk is now removed, and you can safely keep going. Similarly, jumping at him from a great distance or from a ledge where he can't really get to you feels kind of less impactful than if you were to be in a sticky situation and you managed to get out of it. This doesn't just happen with enemy threats. Lolly. Oh. My cat just toppled my computer. Lolly, please be nice. Sonic can jump in the water, run through it, and jump out of it like it's no big deal. But the danger here is a time limit. If you can't get out of the water in time, you'll die. The hair on the back of my neck is just standing up listening to that jingle. Communicating the perception of the danger to the player effectively adds to the sense of reward, because it's not the game itself that rewards the player, it's the player's perception of overcoming the risk that rewards them. This feels really good when it's close to the climax. Here in Kirby Superstar, one of my favorite games, after fighting Meta Knight, the ship starts blowing up and turns into an awesome chase sequence. In this portion, Meta Knight doesn't actually pose much of a risk, but the goal of the player isn't to fight him anymore, it's to get off the ship. It's blowing up. The game does a fantastic job of communicating what's at stake here with this frantic music and the time limit at the bottom. It really motivates you to get the heck out of there. As a kid, my eyes were glued to the screen for this whole sequence. I remember my little brother and I just panicking. payoff at the end of this sequence is amazing because it's just Kirby riding off into the distance with a wheelie, and it feels great. Risk versus reward also plays into how the players will play the game. In Paper Mario Sticker Star, you're engaged in turn-based battles where you use stickers to collect in order to defend yourself against enemies. The problem is, each encounter you may end up using 2 or 3 more stickers than you actually get from defeating them. And you don't get any experience points from battles, so there's really no means of increasing your sticker efficiency or even really growing as a character. The risk at this point of entering a battle is high, and the reward is low. This means that it just makes more sense to run away from enemy encounters and just never enter a battle if possible. I ended up really disliking this game because of this. I doubt this flaw was the intention of the developers, but because of that bad design of risk versus reward, the battle system just wasn't fun. In Pokemon Black and White, a Pokemon called Audino, which yields much higher experience when defeated and is very easy to fight, was added to the game. It's a pretty reliable encounter, and it can appear in a lot of areas in the game without really going too far out of your way. Because of this, it was so commonly used as a training punching bag that it became a meme. The pure efficiency and reward factor from training against Audino so overshadowed any other method in the game that it just felt almost useless to level up Pokemon in any other way. With all of this in mind, it's not as easy as simply adding a lot of obstacles or a lot of collectibles to a game to add value to it. Let's pretend for a moment you're playing your favorite game, and mid-game you hand the controller off to someone who's never played a video game in their entire life. It might be hard for them to even navigate the controller, never mind be able to understand what to do with it. If they aren't able to overcome any obstacles at all because of their difficulty with playing, they may get frustrated and simply give up. Conversely, if you were to pop in a game card and it immediately presented you with a game clear screen, you'd probably feel ripped off. There's a delicate balance that you have to maintain if you want your game to appeal to a broad audience. Remember, the more risky going for the reward factor is, the greater the payoff, but the further away risks are, the easier the game is to play. The balance of difficulty is important too. If, as the player, you actually have to go out of your way to encounter any difficulty, you'll probably feel a lack of engagement as you progress, and as a result, the game will be less impactful to you. But if it's too difficult, you might drop the game before you even complete it. Know your audience and how you want them to play your game, then balance risk and reward from there. While some games completely aim for one side of the spectrum or the other as a way of differentiating themselves, it could be said that there's less perceived value for large audiences to play these games because their risk versus reward factor is a little too unbalanced. Keep in mind, I say most people because there are a few gamers whose comfort level tends a little bit to the left or to the right of the average. A lot of modern AAA titles have scalable difficulty these days, or post-game content like a New Game Plus or extra challenge levels, purely for the fact that they want to be able to have the most people possible invest time in their game and have it feel worth it. An example of a series that did this in a very effective way was Guitar Hero. While anyone can slug through easy mode for most songs, playing on Expert felt like a huge achievement to some and an impossible feat to others. I remember going to Best Buy with my little brother, and they had this copy of Guitar Hero 3 up for demo. He gathered this huge crowd by playing Through the Fire and Flames on Expert. People applauded afterwards. It was nuts. The factors that are really the most memorable for a lot of people are those moments of their accomplishments. From simple memories of things like beating the boss to more complex feelings like when your favorite pairing of characters finally get together, these are the really memorable moments because of the risk-reward factor, although it's kind of hard to see in some cases. They're memorable because remembering the feelings that come with overcoming obstacles then leads to a proficiency in overcoming that obstacle again later. Memory works in this way because whether it be hunting a mammoth in the Ice Age or the feeling of a hard day's work as a dish pig in your first job, you have to be motivated to continue when it benefits your survival. That's why they're the most memorable and impactful. You're built that way because of your ancestors. It's how you survive, and it's why the appeal of a challenge, while relative to the participant, is practically universal. Remembering to balance risk versus reward is important to making a game for a lot of reasons. It helps players remember how to play and feel good for playing. It also controls the flow of your game and justifies its mechanics. There's no point in going for a takedown in Burnout 3 if it's too difficult or there's no reward. People fed their dream eaters in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance because it was actually worthwhile to strengthen them. And it's why you'll always remember the excitement and the adrenaline you feel when you had one stock left and you completely turned the game around in Smash Bros. These are the moments you play games for, and a truly great game has this in mind at all times. What are your favorite memories of video games, and how did risk versus reward factor in?